So I thought I'd just do a quick video on what I was saying in the charts channel because yeah, it might be a bit bloody confusing. Um, um, so US dollar dominance, obviously we're getting a bounce now off this 3 weekly level. I wanted a little bit lower. Obviously I don't always get what I want, so I'm just trading what I see. Still in 4 day supply, it's a week supply, but we've just got to see what happens. But I'm looking for, so this is the 5 day. So I'm looking today, like I said, for closes over the 5 day. So flipping this and creating a 5 day demand or also creating a 3 day demand here. Now at this stage, obviously this candle, preferably it would be stronger and close somewhere up here, and they would be strong demands. Like at the moment, as if it closed now, they would be weak demand, but there's still demand and demand I would look to trade, given we've had a decent retracement and we're kind of in an area we could bounce. Although, like I said, I would have wanted a little bit lower. And you know, over here and in previous consolidations on US dollar dominance, when BTC is messing around, like obviously it can like look like, so in the case here, it kind of was rejecting local supply, then it went up and closed above and seemed like it was going to break above, but then came down. So this is still quite early relative to this. And even similarly, like you can see things like here where it looks like it's going to close above, it actually did create a 3 day demand there, just by a small amount, not a very good one, but and then it just powered back through it. So it doesn't necessarily mean like nothing's ever certain. And I'd always prefer if I saw this kind of pattern, in a at the start of an impulse or something like that. But we'll see, because even at least if it gets a bounce up to here, or even taking out some of these highs, then obviously we're going to get decent shorts on the alt market, um, and on the Bitcoin more than likely. Um, Bitcoin, as I just said, like I was looking at that 5 day demand. So that was where I had an alert today. Obviously, there's chop in here, there's stops underneath here that make me nervous. And then there was that premium that I talked about on CME. So when we created this weekly demand and this 5 day on the, the normal US dollar pair, these were at the same price, but we had a contract changeover. You can see where this symbol is on Wednesday. And the price then, so they moved to a later contract, and the price was $1,000 higher. That's dropped, I think, now to around 600, but still, as a result, this hasn't tested the weekly demand, which I would prefer it to have done. I mean, it doesn't have to, I guess, but quite often we do see CME kind of leading what the US dollar pair is doing more recently. So yeah, kind of my preference would have been for this to be a little bit lower. Um, Ether, yeah, like I've said, this created, I had an aggressive alert for, I'm sorry, this is not Ether. This is Ether. So I had an aggressive alert based on this 3 day demand here. I did put in the comment, there was a 12-hour right above, so we could get a bounce on the 12-hour, which has happened. Starting to drift down again now, so maybe it's going to come back in there. Like, given it's Friday, it's possible we do still hang out here rather than just fall off a cliff over the weekend. But then again, you never know. Again, recall this is still this 3 month supply, so any longs I'm putting in here are consciously wary. Be wary. Obviously, use stops anyway, but particularly like don't be spot buying here. This is not for me a place to spot buy. Unless or if you do, like, wait for a bit more confirmation. But yeah, I don't think spot buying is the way to go here. Like, really, you want it lower, or you want to see a significant break up and then coming back and testing this range, then I would look for spot buys. And then what I really wanted to talk about in this video was others. And so others has hit this daily supply in here. And my preference, as I said previously, would have been for it to go up into weekly here, but it doesn't have to. And the problem I've got now, obviously, is that so Bitcoin's obviously broken the high. But in fact, actually, I don't know if I commented on the last video. I think I did briefly on the last video if you watched it. But in fact, none of the others, it's only the US dollar pair that's broken the high. Like Korea, as you know, is still at 5 day supply. BTC pound is still in the monthly supply there. BTC Euro is still in monthly supply, and BTC Yen still in monthly supply up there, withdrawn. So that's kind of interesting. So really, it's like the dollar weakness that's taken a lot of this up. But I guess it still doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to continue. But anyway, so similarly, what we've got is total not having broken out either. It's in monthly supply. Total 2 is in weekly, again, could go higher to monthly supply if Ether wants to be stronger, then that could get taken up. Total 3 is hit monthly supply, and you can see all of these now have gaps to demand as well. And then others, we've got the weaker. So it's possible, that others is just weaker. Or it's possible that alts are still going to get another run. But there's some, so my overall concerns from the top down on this is, many times before I've talked about this being a possibility of a double top, and the fact for me, like, that's also supported by the fact that price at the low never tests the yearly level. So that's kind of my macro bearish scenario. And I talked about this a lot on Ether, and Ether obviously we haven't got all the way down there yet, but Ether has come all the way down to here. Whereas others, did manage a higher bounce, like held up by some stronger alts. So again, that's kind of interesting, and it doesn't have to. Obviously, nothing has to follow. Like the bull scenario on this is we are still in this large 2-month demand. It hasn't broken down. I'll show you that. So, the way I draw this on the 3 candles, so it's that whole massive area. And then I think there's a monthly inside it, yeah. So the monthly, which it swing failed and held there. So the bullish scenario is, we swing failed this monthly zone, it's reclaimed the zone, and it's just going to go up. So maybe I'm wrong, but that's my macro concern, is that that's going to be a double top. Then the sort of mid-time frame concern that I had on the weekly was that we were going to get a head and shoulders here, and I've again said this a few times for a while, that I thought this was a possibility. Again, I want, the preference for a head and shoulders would have been for that low to break, and we have made a higher low here, so it's not ideal, but it's still based on the possibility of a double top there. We do have, and we've got a lot of alts now at this, have retesting in this area. A lot of them have 3-month monthly supply in there. So again, my macro, or sort of mid-time frame macro concern, is that this is going to play out as a head and shoulders, and again get back to at least there where kind of Ether has bounced, and then we'll just see, and again this could still hold a bigger range here, or it could drop to that yearly that I've said. So there's that. Then as we get lower time frame, obviously there's lots of other factors. So I did draw a couple of them earlier, so let me just see which. Maybe I should just redraw them just to be clearer. So at the moment, on the low time frame, what we have is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, whether or not this is the starting impulse of, a correction, and we're going to have a good giant impulse, and I'm completely wrong in my bearish scenario, and that, the bullish, the 2-month demand is still going to play out. We still have 5 waves up. And if we have the 5 waves up, then we can, rather than just correcting and bouncing here and continuing, we could then see 3 waves down. So, even just a simple Elliott wave, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B, C. So that was kind of what I drew with, I think, this to get down potentially to here. Whether or not, and then there's the bullish, more at least locally bullish, mid-time frame bullish scenario, is that perhaps we then get a bounce here, we do make a higher low, and then we get back up into that supply. But obviously that's a long way off. The other possibility, is that I was looking at was that, again, it still plays out the same thing, but, that we bounce off this weekly, we come retest new supply in here, we go down to the lower zone, and then we go up. But even that, it's very hard to judge the order things happen. You just have to look at zones as and when they hit and the strength you get from them. Because, now if we get a close here, maybe we'll get a rally up in the weekend and then it'll come down here, in which case, if that's already tested first, then this, if it gets a bounce, is more likely to run through it. Whereas if this doesn't test now, if we just come straight down into here, that's more likely to reject. It doesn't have to make a lower low, maybe it'll reject, but it's more likely to get a rejection in there. And then, as I said, like what we did have back here, and this is, one thing I got a little bit burnt on because I was still a bit too bearish here. Well, not bearish, but no, not bearish. In fact, I was bullish, but I wanted lower on this retracement on the majors particularly. So some of the majors, and this is exactly what happened. I had short entries in there and went straight up through it because they'd kind of tested, in some cases, not all, but locally we'd had some tests in here. So thus when it did and like go back and test this zone properly, it went straight through it. You know, now obviously we've got a bit of a bigger correction here. So again, I don't know if that's indicative of a reversal now, and we're going to come back and test this lower level. The lower demand doesn't go through the immediate demand. We want to come back and test the start of the impulse to see if we're going to get a higher low. And we do have some, you know, examples like over here, for example, you know, we had these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up, and then, you know, it didn't even get much of a bounce in the middle, and it came all the way back down to the start before we started consolidating better. So that's possible. The other thing I spotted, I guess, on the bull side was this consolidation. That is kind of bearing some resemblance to that there. So and again, you know, this did, I guess, arguably then we would potentially get this test up now if we followed this similar pattern. Then we come back down into these weekly demands, and then we'd get a big move up. So that's, again, just as I just described, you know, if this is tested already before we hit the weekly, then it's more likely the weekly is going to push up through. Now, the problem we've got also on this with the others chart is that's all fair and well, but a lot of the majors have already hit those zones. So let's look, and I don't know if these are the best examples. So yeah, but the old majors are slightly different in structure, so they're not as clean from that perspective. But certainly the new majors, for example, let's look at ADA. So you can see here, ADA is potentially going to make these 3 and 5 day supplies that I've already got drawn in. It has some consolidation here, you know, so arguably it could just run through this if it comes back, but you know, it's already in this weekly zone. Could go a bit lower into that daily inside, and you know, the zones untested below that obviously have missed alerts on before. But again, you know, so if the others chart is going to play out, you know, to drop this down, does that mean then ADA, has it gone? ADA is then going to drop or like immediately into this lower area without much bounce at all. Alternatively, you know, maybe others is going for that retest there, then we see the retest on ADA as well, and then we get that drop, and then others just doesn't get the bounce on this middle level. So yeah, I've got, obviously, that's, I hope that's not too confusing, but I've got, yeah, a few sort of concerns. But really, again, just trading zones as and when they hit. So, you know, now we've got all these majors. So as I've said, you know, we had so many majors coming into demands. You know, all of these I've had in my videos if you've watched them. So, you know, I'm more aggressive on TRX on this 5 day. So some of the, 4 day demand there. Some of these I might have put like after, I'm not sure, TRX in my last video. Like occasionally I set alerts and they're not in the videos, but for the most part they should be. But yeah, TRX, I had a more aggressive one just because it's so strong. It has come off a short entry for daily supply, so I guess we'll see. BCI, like I need to go through all of the majors as well, because again, you know, there's so many factors. BCH, for example, 6-month demand at the lows, but 3-month supply at the highs. So I'm, you know, my bias is very indecisive. And I need to think through things. So BCH is on a weekly demand. It's had a few tests on it, and now come back down a bit deeper. It's got swing fails of a double top here that I've talked about previously. But you know, is it, again, are we just going to see the strength of this coming up? Is it going to go up and test, you know, higher now? Or are we getting a bigger breakdown based on that larger 3-month supply and then this 2-week inside it? Might just take out that zone just a bit clearer what I'm doing. Yeah. So there's that, and then yeah, Ripple again, the structure is a bit different, but it's in a weekly demand. It did bounce off in the top, but straight back into daily supply, and now is deeper in the zone. So again, just need to see what it gives off this level. Litecoin, I think I was slightly more aggressive just because at one point it aligned better, but it really should have hit there. So anyway, it's come down a bit low. I did say that this was possibly too aggressive with so much consolidation above. It's got a 5 day and a weekly, just kind of down in this circle, so just keep an eye on that if this continues to drop. Ada just talked about BNB again. I put a more aggressive one. It had a 3-day demand here. It's still, you know, in 3-week supply, so it's aggressive, it's risky, you know, much like an ether trade here. Just see what happens. Links hit weekly demand. Dogecoin again, I just went, just because of the way it was looking, I had an alert on this 12-hour here, because of sometimes when you get a consolidation above the zone like this, you can get a stop hunt into the zone and then it moves up again. But again, it's being a bit slow. There is also a 4-hour below here, so again, you can watch that if this drops a bit more. Else the weekly below. and that's it on those. And then the other new majors, so Sol has had no alert because my alert at the moment is kind of down here because I was going for, is this going to give a bigger wave? And I didn't really like this weekly, nor the fact this is coming off monthly supply up here. And also it's in a bigger 3 month supply. So we'll see. But you can trade here if you want on this. And near again is at the moment is slightly above my entry because I alerted this weekly zone, but it's trying to bounce on the 3 week. Again, there's got other zones below. So a lot of these just watch the zones. They're not hard to draw. They're all high time frame. Like make sure you draw the 3, 4, 5 day, and if it starts dropping, and the weekly obviously, and if it starts dropping through weeklies, then you're looking at the 4 day or 5 day below for the next possible bounces if you're DCAing on these. And Atom also set weekly demand there. So yeah, and did I say dot? So dots, I think there's a 2 day there, but it's just slightly above my weekly level there. But again, all of these are going to potentially create sort of 3, 4, 5 days supplies. Yeah, so I just want to see, and they've been giving nice retests. So we had a really nice short entry that again I gave in the video here on dot. But as I've talked about now, once we've started coming down like this, and once we started to hit major demand, if the market is very bullish, then these should be going up to the next supply and not really stopping in this area, except perhaps for a consolidation. Maybe we go up into daily supply there and retest, and then just see if this is a local uptrend is going to continue for a while. But again, the other problem, looking at dot now, we're in this giant 3 month supply here, so maybe this is just going to play out for a lower low. That's the macro. It's just a question of all the waves you get in between, and this is why my videos or analysis can get quite complicated, because I am looking at all the time frames, and I think you need to. But it's up to you. I think at least know what you're doing. If you're choosing to long BNB, for example, in 3 week supply, then at least know what you're doing and get out quickly if it's not going to give you the extra wave that you want, or another push into whatever supply you're looking at above, for example. Similarly here, if we're not getting a quick bounce off this weekly and it starts to drift into it, then you might want to get out. Or if it gives a bounce, then just move your stop to break even quicker. So that's kind of all those things anyway. Anyway, this is 17 minutes. It's slightly longer than I wanted on this video, but covered kind of a bit. So hope that makes it a little bit clearer. And then, yeah, we'll just see what happens. Oh, wait, one last thing. So yeah, the other thing I'm looking at is what also going to create monthly supply and monthly demand. So yeah, just do be very careful of that. I'm very conscious of that. I haven't got any examples up here of things I think that will create monthlies, perhaps Nero. No, but yeah, we are getting some of these candles now closing under the April candle. So if you see this candle turn red and close under there, then I'll be looking for shorts on that, and all the same on the 3 week. You might listen. Nero's on another good example of that, but we shall see. But anyway, I'll try and do a bit more on that sort of next week or over the weekend.